Thank you for joining me on this tutorial. This is AnnHelen. We're using the photo you see on the left from Pinterest as a reference, which I have converted to black and white so it will be easier for us to find the values. I start by blocking in the general shape of the image from the left, basically the contours of her hair, neck, and shoulders. Then I begin drawing the main cranium structure. The face is facing front toward us, the viewers, so I draw a central line down the middle of the sphere with a slight tilt according to the reference. Then I draw in two horizontal lines, the first one across the equator to indicate the eyebrows, and the second one underneath that to indicate the level of the eyes. The cranium structure is slightly flattened on both sides of the ears, and I measure the distance of the three parts of the face that share about the same proportions. From the hairline to the eyebrow line, from the eyebrow line to the bottom of the nose, and from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. From the flattened sides of the sphere, I draw lines to indicate the jawlines and join them to the chin. Each of the two eyes are roughly about 1/5 the width of the sphere, and they're also about one eye apart. However, I will adjust the distance between her eyes and the size of her eyes according to the reference photo. I always start the nose from the eyebrows and between the eyes because that is the center of the face. I follow the central vertical line to draw in both sides of the nose bridge and very lightly indicate the wings of the nose and the nostrils. I measure the size of her mouth by dropping in imaginary lines from both of her eyes, and I lightly indicate the top and bottom of her mouth. Make sure you draw very lightly at this stage because a lot of these lines need to be erased later. In my opinion, the construction stage of drawing the face is the most important stage. Think of it as drafting the blueprint or laying down a good foundation before you begin to build a house. So take your time at this stage. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm simply making a rough likeness to the reference photo because that is a more realistic goal under the time constraints. So you should set realistic goals for each of your drawing lessons too. So have you counted how many times I've drawn and redrawn the eyes, nose, and the lips by now? You don't have to because I've stopped counting myself. My goal is simply to achieve a comfortable degree of similarity between my drawing and the reference photo, and then I can go on to the next stage of my drawing. I try not to add any details to any of the facial features, and now that we're going into the hair, I need to keep that in mind. I want to get a basic idea of the shape of the hair around the head and her face, and it's easy to fall into the temptation of wanting to capture all the beautiful curls. So as beautiful as the hair is, I want to remind myself that I want my viewer or the audience to focus on the center of her face. That is probably mostly between her eyes and her nose. And at this drafting stage, I am not allowed to shade. I'm only allowed to build in the basic shapes and forms of the hair. One of the most common mistakes is to get drawn into drawing the details before your drawing is ready. And trust me, I can fall into this temptation too. And one way to avoid that pitfall is to keep your drawing small. And also give yourself a time limit for each drawing. This video is 3 times the original speed. So you can figure out how much total time I spent on this drawing. I'm pretty happy with the overall construction of this drawing or its blueprint, so I'm going to go in and start erasing some of these construction lines. My focus is now on the shading of the face and the head and the overall torso. So where are the darkest darks and the lightest lights of the portrait or her face? And just as importantly, where are the medium values in this portrait? So to answer those questions, I look at the reference photo. The darkest values are in the curls of her hair, especially on the shadow side. And I start shading in some of the darker values with a 4B pencil. A good general rule to follow is to start shading from dark to light. So I start shading in the darker areas of the hair, but I don't go too dark all at once. I want to preserve some of the highlights even in the darker areas. For example, some of the curls that turn towards the light will have lighter values. And to avoid the trap of working too many details into a part of the portrait that is not the most important, I try to think I'm not drawing hair, I'm simply drawing the shapes. I try to keep this in mind, especially if I'm working on portions of the portrait that's further away from the center of the focus, which is the center of the face. So I'm indicating the form and the shape of this darker area. Another good rule of thumb is to remember that you don't want to draw every strand of hair. Instead, you want to draw the hair in clumps that you can see or find. Luckily for us, the hair on the right is separated into clumps. Unlike the hair on the left side of the face, you could very easily see and follow the clumps from almost the root to the end. So the danger is to make this part of the hair become the focus. So I need to stop working on the hair for too long. Let's move on to the skin tone areas. And we begin at the darkest area of the skin tones, which is under the chin and on the neck areas. I need to go back using my 2B pencil because in comparison to the darker areas of the hair, the darker part of her skin is so much lighter. While I'm shading in the darkest values of her neck and torso, I'm making sure these areas don't go as dark as her hair. And also which part of the face is darker or lighter than these areas I'm shading. I want to keep the value relationships in the skin tone areas and the overall portrait correct. If you feel like you've learned something from this video or that you simply enjoyed it, please click the like or thumbs up button and consider subscribing to my channel so you will get the latest videos. Supporting me these ways mean that I can continue to make videos like this. And feel free to leave a comment or give me feedbacks on these tutorials. You can even post before and after images of your drawing or painting to show how much you have learned or improved because of this tutorial. Thank you so much for your support. While shading, constantly look back and forth between the reference photo and your own drawing to make sure that you have a good value relationship in the skin tone area and also between the skin tone and other areas of your portrait. Now I'm shading the darker areas of the face first, following the rule of shading from the darker to lighter areas. Look at how I am holding my pencil so I can achieve a very soft layer of darker values. And although I'm using my 2B pencil, I'm not pressing it too hard or using too much pressure because I'm not achieving the darkest values on the face just yet. The darkest values on the face are probably the two eyes, and next to them the shadows in the eye sockets. And the 5 main shadow areas on the face under normal light conditions. They include the eye socket, under the nose, under the upper and lower lips, and under the chin.